So, hi everyone, welcome to the RGB Games Programming Conference. It's super weird to hear my voice in echo, but it's gonna be okay. Of course, I always do my presentation comic sans, as soon as it comes. And so I'm really happy to welcome you today. So the goal of this font is in purpose if there's like designer or artists coming to the conference. Now supposedly they run away because of this font, so that we can be in our niche game tech environment. And so I'm just going to present myself quickly. So I'm the main organizer of this conference. I'm an indie game developer at Team Kwakwa. I've been making games for about 10 years. I'm also the head of the games programming department at the Institute in Geneva here. And I'm the co-organizer of the game developer Swiss Romand meetup. And that's me on the horse as well. During those 10 years at Team Kwakwa, I did a lot of little game jams, little prototype. Some went a bit bigger, and I developed them for several years and released them. It was a lot of fun. It still is. In all kind of various ways. So I could not define the genre of game I do. I do a lot of things, and I like to do that. I'm more of an indie spirited game developer. I'm currently working on a tactical RPG with a real-time battle system called Soup Raiders. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here because I'm crazy enough to not organize one but 3 conferences every year with this RGB concept. And those 3 colors that you may know if you do a bit of computer graphics or art or this RGB. We had the red for indie last year, end of October, the red for indie. It was a lot of fun. We were in the amphitheater there here in at the Octagon in Geneva. But this time is the green for industry, green for the little dollar bill, but we'll see also green for environment, for a lot of different things, and hopefully soon we're gonna have this university year, the blue for student. But today is green for industry, so we have a whole lineup of people working in the game industry that are gonna talk about a whole kind of various subject, but first, I have to do my rant. I like doing my rants. And this opening keynote is about what if things could get worse. So the first part, when I'm going to be talking, is going to be a bit pessimistic. But I'm also going to welcome afterward Nicolas Siorak, who's going to manage to talk about really horrible things, but with a nice little smile on his face, a super optimistic tone. So we'll see how it goes. But for me, it was important, looking at the industry last year and this year, to talk about what I was thinking about. So according to the Los Angeles Times, about 6,500 jobs have been lost in the game industry in 2023, and it's not even counting the January month of this year. So looking from outside might not be that great. And so I had this little thought experiment, because my job, I mean, at Team Kwakwa I'm a co-founder, so I can't get fired because I'm not an employee. But at SA Institute Genève, I am an employee. And so I did the little thought experiment of, oh, what if I get fired? Because that could be the worst that would happen to me at SA Institute. The first thing I thought was like, I'm gonna miss all the coffee breaks with the colleagues. Because those are really lovely moments. We arrive a bit earlier before the courses. I do my little tea because actually I don't drink coffee. But we talk about anything, and those kinds of moments are great. And I realized if I get fired, I will lose all these moments. Like there's still some friends, there are still friends, but I have to go to their places, and my colleagues are French, so I have to actually go to like Lyon and Grenoble, which is like 2 hours trip to go to their place. So that's a bit sad. The other one, which actually might be a positive point, is I don't have to do the round trips to Geneva anymore. I kind of like Geneva now, but if you know that Lausanne and Geneva people, there's like rivalry, and so if I don't have to go to Geneva, I'm not going to be that sad, so that's okay. But train rides are always nice. I can read, I can do things, so those I will miss a bit. But also I won't be teaching. I won't have a classroom of students who will be the future talents of the game industry. And after a long time, you realize that's actually great to be talking about those students, what they're thinking about, to guide them in their journey to become game developers. And I've been working for 7 years at this Institute Geneva. That's a picture of me 7 years ago at Christmas. And well, I still have the beard and everything, so it's not, I didn't change that much physically, but it's long, 7 years actually. And the thing is, I could be fired. I mean, no, my boss is like super nice, but if I was working at a big game company or anything, I could just be fired for no reason whatsoever, just because of numbers on an Excel sheet. And I find it just sucks. But of course, this thought experiment is like the worst case scenario that could happen to me. It's just me getting fired. Or like hundreds of thousands of people. That's maybe not that local, but maybe things can even get like worse on like a global scale. And for that, I'm not that much of an expert of how much it can go worse on a global scale. So I welcome on stage my dear friend Nicolas Siorak.
Hi everyone. Thank you very much RGB for inviting me, and thank you especially Elias Farhan for inviting me. Even if I just have to say that it's another proof of his sadism, as he perfectly knows I'm almost not alive before noon, so don't blame me if you have to endure both my French accent and my bad jokes so early in the morning. It's his responsibility. So just a few words to introduce myself. I'm Nicolas Siorak. I'm the head of the Geneva Resilience Center. I've been working for 20 years for governments and businesses on environment and economic issues. I'm a researcher on climate change perspective and adaptation issues, reviewer for the IPCC. And in the same time, for the last 20 years, I've been trying to be understood by students, but succeeding in helping them getting confidence and enthusiasm in their projects. And for the last three years, I've been the head of the bachelor of the SA Institute in Geneva, and more precisely, in charge of the applied research in creative media fields, which is highly addictive. So I'm here to talk about the Anthropocene and what we know, where we are currently regarding climate issues. But before that, before welcoming you to the Anthropocene, we have to say goodbye to the Holocene and to make few reminders. The first one is the fact that during almost 10,000 years, humanity has known an exceptional time of stability. During 10,000 years, the global average temperature The echo is very difficult. I'm sorry. Has been exceptionally stable, evolving between minus 0.5 degree or plus 0.5 degrees. And that stability is one of the main factors of the development of our civilization. With this stability, you have the development of the agriculture, the food systems, the cities, all the infrastructures we have built are the results of the stability. Before the Holocene, during the Pleistocene, people had to move because of climate or water conditions. The stability has produced our current civilization. And unfortunately, we are not anymore in that times of stability. And so I can now welcome you to an unstable era. And what happens during this new times, new period? The first fact is the increase of the global average temperature, which is observable since the beginning of the last century, with an increase and acceleration of the warming observed globally. And here we have a second problem, because we are already at plus 1.5 degrees globally, and because of the climate inertia, we already know we're going to experience plus 2 degrees between 2030 and 2050. Maybe 2 degrees, it doesn't mean a lot for you, but the scientific community has defined that since we reached plus 2 degrees globally, our civilization will potentially not be able to cope with all the consequences of the global warming. We will have to find new solutions to reorganize ourselves, because our current organizations, civilizations, infrastructure are absolutely not adapted to a plus 2 degree world. And what happens in a plus 2 degree world? You have large parts of the world suffering from both heat and humidity. And for Southeast Asia, India, East Asia, south of Europe, and as well East America, we will have some places where people just won't be able to live, to work, or to develop things. And if you look at the locations, you see for your activities, you have places involved otherwise in gaming activities and so on. So we will have to move again. The new displacement, just as we known during the Pleistocene 10,000 years ago. Let's talk a bit about planet boundaries as well, because the climate issue is not the only one. We have as well issues with the biosphere integrity. For instance, in 2017, Ceballos published a paper entitled the annihilation, yes, very difficult to spell, of biodiversity, which explains how much we are producing bad effects both on insects, mammals, and also biodiversity on Earth, which can be very destabilizing. And why we focus on climate change? It's because if we try to tackle seriously climate change, you can tackle in the same time the other boundaries and having positive effects on them, such as water, biosphere, novel entities, the way we use land. If we want to tackle climate change, we have to tackle everything and to modify absolutely all our ways of doing, producing, consuming, and moving ourselves around the world or within countries. Another aspect important to be stressed is the fact if someone talks with you about climate without talking about energy, is not serious. You cannot dissociate the two issues. Energy and climate are completely linked. And what we anticipate regarding energy, even in a country like France, as you see, between the energy globally consumed in the country today and 2050, we anticipate, if we want to follow the good path for climate, a reduction of 40% of the energy consumed. We will have to reduce. One way or another, we will have to reduce our energy consumption. And for our civilization, it's not usual to take such path and such trends. We are so used to increase, both for consumption, productions, GDP, and so on, but we will have to reduce. And the reduction could be quite radical. Here, it's not a graph about the energy, it's a graph about the greenhouse gases emissions. And as you see, if we want to follow secured path for civilization, it's an abrupt reduction. Before 2050 in the best case, or later in the worst case. But it will be radical. We will have to deal with radicality. For every business, every sector, every behavior, we have to anticipate radicality. Let's talk now a few minutes about raw material issues and fantasy transition. Maybe you have heard some people talking about the fact that, oh, that's not a problem. We will electrify everything, and it's true. Electrify everything is a mantra used in societies currently. But this electrification won't replace simply what we do with fossil fuels. It's not possible. That will not happen. If we want to follow the correct path for the next decade, if we want to reach a net zero scenario in 2030, we will have to multiply by 6 the use of raw materials we use and consume today. By 6. Multiplication by 6. You will say, oh, okay, no problem. We're going to mine, we're going to take new materials. Unfortunately, that won't be possible. And I think the best illustration for this impossibility is the copper production. If you look at the copper production, which is one of the raw materials the most used in infrastructures and even in IT and so on, we are already in a shortage of copper, and we anticipate that the shortage will be by 6 million tons in 2030, while producing more or less 20 million tons in 2030. We won't be able to replace all our current activities fueled with fossil fuels with electric energy. That won't be possible. So finally, we are beginning an era of priorities and ruptures. Oops. So we're going to move on. Regarding priorities, what tells us the science regarding what we're going to experience in the next decades? We already know that we will have to make a focus on water, energy, food, and health systems. That's the systems we will have to secure and make the most efforts, push the energy, the available raw materials will be mostly dedicated to these systems: health, energy, food, and water. That means for the other sectors, they will have to take new habits and to work while there will be enough energy, enough materials to dedicated to these other sectors. Again, what tells us the science about these issues? We know we will have to deal both with mitigation and adaptation. We will have to reduce our consumptions, but with increasing effects. Just to remind you, there's an inertia of 2 decades between the causes and the effects of climate change. What we experience currently, we already know that it will get stronger and more frequent in the next 2 decades. The heat waves, the storms, and so on. And that will make us use energy and raw materials to secure or reconstruct strategic infrastructures. So now to finish, few consequences for the game industry. You could say, okay, video games accounts only for 5% of digital resources depletion and 2% of greenhouse gas emissions. But even with these figures, for the game industry, we already know it will have to slow. One way or another, it will have to slow. It will have to slow its consumption of energy. It will have to slow its consumption of raw materials, which is not the case currently. New topics of research, of development, both for professionals and for companies, like circular economy. How do we apply circular economy within the video game industry? That will be a main issue. And as well, more research, more skills, competencies, more studies done to consider a life cycle assessment of the activities within the video game industry. Whatever it could be, the raw material extraction, the manufacturing, the use, and so on. What consequences for the game developers? I think the first one is very simple, finally. It's just a question of education. As a human being, as a professional, we have to be aware of what are the issues, how strong it will impact our activities. It's a question of responsibility for ourselves, but for our work or industry. And fortunately, you have already some available resources, like the EJEDA, Climate Special Interest Group, with a lot of resources, a lot of ideas, of good practices, which can be used. After that, we have to anticipate in the video game industry a service degradation. That potentially, in your world, degraded mode is already something you have in mind or familiar with? Degradation? Yeah. The degradation of the services. How do we work when we have lesser energy, when you have to shut off some data centers and so on? It's something to be anticipated. Energy efficiency and how do you work and anticipate the game, however will work? Energy efficiency will become an increasingly important issue. And to finish with something positive, maybe you are familiar with the concept of resilience. How do we cope with the difficulties, the shock we have to face? And the first point and the most important one about resilience is the fact that the first factor of resilience is the population. And as a game developer, you are a community. And talking about that, spreading the words, the knowledge about the issues will increase the resilience of the game dev community and finally the resilience of the game industry, simply. It relies on human beings, on what we feel and how we want to act about that. And to finish, you have succeeded in the first level, enduring my French accent. The second one will be education, spending time on books, papers on the issue. And I would say the third one relies on you, on the energy, on the will you will find in yourself to tackle these issues and to create new solutions, new ways of working, new KPI in your industry. So it's your responsibility, and that something that can be very enthusiastic for you as professional and as young professionals as well in the audience. And I'm done. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nicolas. So I don't know. Yeah, okay. So I wanted to finish this opening keynote with some dumb thoughts about the end of the world. Yeah. But like I needed to put some assembly somehow in my opening keynote, so that's my way to go there. So going to some compiler tricks, we all know our sort of optimization flags. If you play a bit with CMake or Visual Studio, you might actually know those. You have your good old debug flag, the release with debug info, the release one. So the debug flag is, well, it's your code, literally what you wrote, but with the variables on the stack. It's nice, but it's super slow. Release is the optimized version of your code, the one that you hopefully ship, with a lot of SIMD, a lot of like, actually if you look at the assembly, it's often way bigger than the, maybe not the debug, but the release with debugging info. So release with debug info would be like the same version of debugging your code in, when you work in the game industry, because you need a bit of performance and sometimes debug can be way too slow. But it's like, it would be the first pass of the optimization, but still with some way to have some info when you debug. So how does it look like, for example? Compile Explorer. So if I take a really dumb average sign integer function, with a simple loop where you add the result of an array and you divide by the length, well, the debug info looks like this. You push some variable on the stack here, because then you can access them when you debug, and you can see the value of all, at every step, what's happening. Because reading to a register when you debug, not going to work out. So when you put everything in memory, you can see all the values, you're happy. If you go a bit higher with, for example, release with debug info, it's actually a pretty simple code. You could read it if you know a bit of assembly and understand, here's a nice loop, you jump here, you have the IDIV at the end. Perfect. It's pretty simple, it's readable. And then you have the madness of, wait, that was minimum size. That's released with debug info, which start to get a bit bigger. Actually, for this example on Clang, it's the same as release in a way. And you have those wonderful SIMD instructions where like the compiler knows that you have consecutive data, and so it can put them in special kind of register to make those addition in packed addition. It's the padded here, for example. I'm not going to go in the detail of those assembly. It's just for you to see the sort of size with assembly. And I came upon this paper because I was talking with a now new PhD, so now he got his PhD, but he gave me this paper where, so he's a crypto analysis. So his goal is to sort of attack program and things like this. So, so in this paper, what it was interesting for me was not the part of the attack and all the thing in crypto analysis, but it was this sort of measurement of energy for each instruction. So what they were trying to do is guess what the program was doing, reading the power consumption of the CPU. And funny thing, move takes more energy than, for example, flush or random. RD-rand, which is a x86 instruction. And so I was like, oh, because it was breaking my mental model of like each instruction consumes a certain amount of energy and things like this. So it doesn't mean you should not use move anymore in your program, of course not, because it would be really hard. But it made me thought about something. Because maybe, it's a big maybe, I didn't do the actual research, I'm just throwing my thoughts. Maybe /02 on Visual Studio or O3 for Clang and GCC are not as energy saving as we can. And maybe we can have a flag where the compiler has sort of this data on what each instruction use in terms of energy, and sort of make the code not the fastest, but the most energy saving. Like you would say, I have this function, I know it's going to run for X amount of time, how many energy is it going to use? And maybe we might not need 120 Hertz frame rate or even 144 Hertz for your game. Maybe some games was completely fine at 30 Hertz or 60 Hertz. And maybe we don't need for every game to have thousands of servers to run permanently, because they won't run permanently anyway. And of course, I had a discussion with Guy Davidson yesterday, and he's trying to save the world by putting linear algebra into the C++ standard. Good luck with that, Guy. But this is kind of the sort of little ways where we can find hotspots in our whole programming pipeline to save a bit of energy. Okay, stop my read. And now for the speakers. So first we're going to have Alexandre Siorak, who's going to talk about the invisible work of what it takes to make a AAA game. He's working at, still working today, or was until yesterday, yeah, at Quantic Dream. John Guy Davidson is going to talk about what we mean when we talk about platform. Nicolas Schneider is going to talk about how to share tools on several projects using the most of the Unity editor is working at Old School Game. Arash Naderi is a technical designer, and he's going to talk about why being a designer is not enough. Luca Flo is going to talk about his journey as a gameplay programmer in a AA company. And that's for the speaker today. And I'll finish with a small closing keynote. Just for the code of conduct, it's pretty simple. Be nice to each other. Don't be assholes. Don't harass others. Even if they code in JavaScript, it's okay. They're maybe not going to save the world, but they're going to help. And also, don't block the entrance door, otherwise there's going to be an alarm ringing, and then there's going to be Securitas coming, and then we have to pay a fee, and I don't want to pay this fee. So just don't block the door. You can go smoking. There's always going to be someone checking so that you don't get stuck outside, but please don't block this area, and try when you're eating to clean your place afterwards, not to throw tea or coffee everywhere. Coffee is going to come. I'm sorry, we forgot it this morning, but it's going to be fine. So enjoy the event. We have a little bit of time for Q&A if you want also to ask questions to Nicolas about his little talk for the opening keynote. Does anyone want to ask a question? You're too tired to ask questions. Oh, Luca. Oh, you can come, Nico. Can we hear Luca? Maybe you have to turn on the microphone.
Okay, hello.
Perfect.
Okay. Hello, thank you for the talks. I was interested in a more technological solution about video games and what our technical solutions are. Is low-tech a great solution for the future of video games? And what do you think about it? Both of you.
I can begin to reply.
It's you.
low-tech will be used everywhere, not only in the video game industry. While working with automotive industry, shipping industries, they're implementing low-techs in order to reduce their energy consumption. So that will be used, but that potentially won't be enough for video game industry. I was talking about degradation. It's like on-off or configuring the things so they could run at 40% of their capacities if you have not enough energy. And we don't have to wait for that. The echo is...
Yeah, no.
Let me just quote one example. Last summer in California, they had to forbid the Tesla to be charged because they were fearing blackouts. They didn't have enough energy. So it was already the case last summer. So if we observe that, we can anticipate other sectors of our activities will have to reduce their energy consumption. And potentially, video game industry will be considered.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Hello. So,
Hi.
let me, I'm Nicolas. Thank you for your talks. Okay, there. And my question is the following. Are you saying in a convoluted way to stop using game engines and code games from scratch to use resources better? Is that the message?
Not really. So the thing is, how would you know that your game engine is not using as much energy as Unity or Unreal? That's the thing. Like you can do a really good game engine, like a really small one specific for your game, and in theory, it should use less energy than using a whole monster pack like Unreal. The thing is, you could do that pretty bad as well, and have a really terrible game engine that runs super slow and use way too much energy as well. So, like always in those kind of contexts, it depends.
Thanks.
Other questions? Guy!
Oh God, I look awful on that screen. Yes. Right, so my question is, how do we measure how much energy we're using in game development? That's really the problem. We can't control what we can't measure. So without measurements, you know, we don't know if we are going to be doing better or worse, better or worse by changing our practices.
Thank you very much. It's a very good question. During the last 10 years, we have developed a lot of new methodologies to measure both the emissions and the energy consumptions in the other sectors. And now it's time for the video game industry to create these new tools. I was talking about life cycle assessment. It's something very familiar in our industry, and it will be very soon the case in the video game industry, with new tools to measure. You cannot act on something you don't measure. It's very simple. And maybe if I can shortly complete my answer. Within the video game industry, I had talks with Ubisoft, for instance, as they are perfectly aware of the issues or of what will happen on the industry, and they are really thinking about it seriously, trying to anticipate what they will have to modify. So if they do that, I think the other companies as well are thinking about it. And they are human beings. These guys, these ones, are parents. They have relation. They want to be responsible about that as well.
And it was the last question. Thank you very much.
Thank you.